What have we got up now, Wings?
241 section, sir. 2 Corsairs.
Let me know their position.
Aye, aye, sir.
Commander flying, FDO.
FDO, Commander flying.
When is 241 due back, and where are they?
They're red 45 at Angel's 4, sir.
Tell them to return to base and pancake.
Aye, aye, sir.
Hello 241, this is Strong Arm. Return to base and pancake. Over.
Hello, Strong Arm. 241. Contact. Out.
Please, Squadron, stand by to receive 2 Corsairs. Deck control, close up.
Coming in now, sir.
This escort carrier is at sea to enable her pilots to work up to operational efficiency. Among the pilots is one Sub-Lieutenant Wilson. Here he is coming in now. We'll introduce you to him. Wilson was one of those types who thought deck landing was just too easy and that batsmen were an unnecessary luxury.
Ignored my signal, sir. Gave a wave off, and that's the result.
This is the training you do here to prepare you for your actual deck landings. Deck landing is not difficult or dangerous. It's purely a matter of rehearsal, concentration, and perfect drill. Before saying anything about the practice and practicing of deck landing, I'm going to talk about the theory of it. Wilson seems to regard this as a suitable occasion to sleep.
Me, sir? No, sir.
Whatever Wilson thinks, you are all urged to look upon the theory with a great deal of care. You all know why an aircraft stalls under certain conditions and what happens when it does. And you know that in your normal landing approaches, you maintain a comfortable margin of speed above the stalling point. In deck landing, however, you cannot afford that margin of speed because there isn't room, and you must make sure that your aircraft stays on the deck when you cut the throttle. You must eliminate any float by using the precautionary landing technique which you have already been taught. Landing on the deck and staying on it demands more accuracy and steadiness than a normal landing. Develop those qualities and the one of landing your aircraft under the orders of the Deck Landing Control Officer, or DLCO. The essence of the business is, therefore, to bring your aircraft in at the correct speed and in the correct attitude, and also to obey the DLCO's signals.
Damned if I'm going to play second fiddle to any batsman.
Might find yourself playing a harp if you don't.
So much for the broad principles, which we will now consider in more detail. Here is an aircraft in normal flight. Avoiding technicalities, its horizontal line of advance corresponds roughly to the longitudinal axis of the fuselage. If the aircraft reduces speed towards the stalling point, its effective lift is reduced proportionately, causing the aircraft to sink. The rate of descent can be controlled by throttle adjustment, and this control of rate of sink by throttle in response to the bats is the basis of deck landing technique. During this descent, it's vital for the pilot to trim his aircraft in order to obtain and maintain a three-point attitude for landing on the deck. You'll get an opportunity for trying this out when you do your slow flying before starting addles. Another thing is to keep straight, to land down the center of the deck without any drift. That again is a matter of obeying the batting signals. Let's run through these and learn their meanings and application. This is the steady-as-you-go signal, which indicates that all is well. Height, direction, attitude, and rate of sink. This is get up, go higher, or decrease your rate of descent, which means that you must increase throttle in order to gain bearing on the deck. This third signal means come down, come lower, or increase your rate of descent. You must decrease the throttle as necessary, but prevent the aircraft from assuming a nose-down attitude. This is the first of two directional signals and means come to port. You'd receive this signal if you were off-center to starboard. The signal would be given by a large movement of the bats and would be maintained until you'd started to bring your aircraft onto the center line by the use of a combination of rudder and ailerons. This signal will also be given sharply by a flick of the bats if you're approaching with starboard wing down. This signal means come to starboard. It would mean that you were off-center to port, and you would answer by using aileron and rudder together to bring your aircraft onto the center line. You will also be given this signal with a flick as an instruction to lift your port wing. Now we come to two speed and attitude signals. Firstly, raise the nose. Here, your aircraft would be incorrectly trimmed and assuming a two nose down or powered gliding attitude, thus causing an undesirable increase in air speed. The second attitude signal is lower the nose, go faster. Here, your aircraft would be assuming an exaggerated nose-up attitude, and your speed would probably be too slow. Here is the wave off, which would indicate that the deck wasn't clear, that the approach was unsafe, or that the pilot was not obeying the DLCO signals. This is the cut. And here you would at once and without any hesitation chop the throttle closed and maintain the aircraft's attitude and direction until it touches down. A similar signal called the high cut is used during your adult training only, but its implication is just as emphatic as the ordinary one. Finally, 3 signals which are designed to prevent any awkward situation should your cockpit drill be at fault. Firstly, hook not down, lower hook. Secondly, undercarriage not down, lower undercarriage. And thirdly, flaps not down, lower flaps. The pupils now have an opportunity of slow flying their aircraft under actual carrier deck landing conditions. This is in order to get the feel of the aircraft, with hook, wheels and flaps down. Also to ascertain the minimum speed at which they can fly their aircraft short of stalling. Training in slow flying is an essential preliminary to successful deck landings.
You have all completed 2 trips of slow flying. Now you're ready to commence your addles. The program is on the notice board in the crew room. Here is the batsman who will bat you onto the deck, and this pilot will give you demonstrations on how to do it.
It is to be expected at this stage of the training that things rarely go smoothly for any pilot, and Wilson is no exception. And he soon realizes that he has much to learn before he can make a satisfactory deck landing. He is either too high too low, off center to starboard, off center to port, or he is approaching at the wrong speed and has the nose of his aircraft down. Or, as in this case, his aircraft is nose up and too slow. At last, he's abae. Let us see these approaches again in slow motion and analyze them in greater detail. Wilson is approaching too high, and the batsman is telling him to come lower or to increase his rate of descent. The pilot must decrease the throttle as necessary and maintain sufficient pressure upon the control column to prevent the aircraft from assuming a nose down or near gliding attitude. Here, Wilson is going to the other extreme and is receiving the signal, get up, go higher, or decrease your rate of descent. If the signaling is violent in implication, it will be necessary actually to gain altitude by climbing, in which case backward pressure is required on the control column. Now, Wilson's aircraft is approaching with wings level, but is off-center to starboard. And here, his aircraft is assuming a too nose-down or powered gliding attitude. This is causing an undesirable increase in airspeed. He must raise the nose to adjust the attitude and to decrease airspeed, but the throttle must be adjusted to maintain a steady rate of descent.
I hope that has given you an idea of your mistakes. Some of you are still slow in obeying the DLCO's signals. Some of you, too, still don't believe that he knows the answer. Implicit and immediate obedience to him is the only way, and that is what you must and will learn. That's vitally important here, even more so when you're out there, landing on. Only the batsman with your direct obedience can put you down in the right place at the right time. What is more important, modern aircraft such as yours have high landing speeds, and in some cases a restricted angle of vision, and you can't depend upon your own judgment. As in the case of these later carrier-borne aircraft, the Firebrand and the Mosquito, all-up weights and speeds of deck-landing aircraft are constantly increasing. Take another look at the Firebrand. Notice particularly the length of fuselage ahead of the pilot, making him more than ever dependent upon the batsman. And once more, the Mosquito during its first deck-landing trials, with an all-up weight of 20,000 pounds and a touchdown speed of 85 knots. And here is the de Havilland Vampire, which is small, with a good view, but a high landing speed. It needs no imagination to realize that if we are to operate successfully with types such as these, complete confidence between pilot and batsman is essential. So remember, you must obey the bats. And now is the time to develop the habit of obeying him. On returning to the carrier, aircraft fly round at 1,000 feet with hooks down. I've drawn this so often, I'll let it draw itself for a change. We will consider the drill for the simple one carrier, one squadron procedure. Aircraft returning to the carrier proceed to the waiting or squadron break-up position. The waiting position is a left-hand circuit about the carrier, passing close up the starboard side of the ship at a height of approximately 1,000 feet. The correct formation for waiting in this position is flights line astern, and each flight in echelon starboard. For simplicity, we will first illustrate the standard deck landing circuit and approach of a single aircraft. The landing circuit is executed at about 300 feet. The aircraft enters this circuit and flies up the starboard side of the carrier, lowering the arrestor hook before passing the ship. At approximately half a mile ahead of the carrier, the pilot turns left through 180 degrees. This will bring him back on an opposite course to the carrier, so that he will pass the latter of a distance of 800 to 1,400 yards. While on the downwind leg of the circuit, the pilot lowers undercarriage and flaps and completes his cockpit check. He then trims the aircraft at an airspeed of some 10 to 15 knots above the final approach speed. When about level with the DLCO's position, the pilot turns in towards the carrier to complete the final part of the circuit. The DLCO becomes visible almost as soon as the aircraft turns in. Let me emphasize, once more, that his signals must be obeyed implicitly as soon as they are made, but smoothly, so as to assist him in anticipating the future movements of the aircraft. The only action open to the pilot, other than obeying the DLCO, is to fly round again. This the pilot is always entitled to do if he is not satisfied with his approach, but a voluntary wave-off can normally be taken in perfect safety as long as the round-down of the carrier is visible to the pilot. When flying around again, the pilot opens up to full throttle and turns left down the port side of the carrier. He rejoins the landing circuit ahead of the carrier and executes it again exactly as previously described. The standard deck landing approach is carried out as follows. The pilot, after turning in, points the nose of the aircraft at a point half a carrier's length astern of the carrier, and at the same time throttles back to attain the final approach speed. he begins to lose height with a steady rate of descent. As the aircraft approaches the carrier, it tends to drift downwind relative to the latter, so that a gentle turn to port is necessary to keep the nose of the aircraft directed at the point half a length astern of the ship. If the approach is carried out correctly, the rate of turn remains almost steady and results in the aircraft entering the groove at a point about 100 yards astern of the rundown. We can now consider a single flight of aircraft in the waiting position. Either by RT or by the flashing of C for Charlie, it receives the order to land on from the carrier. As the section loses height to enter the landing circuit, the flight leader will lead his flight down in echelon starboard. It enters the circuit at 300 feet and flies close up the starboard side of the carrier in the same direction as the ship. On this leg, all aircraft in the flight adjust speed to slow cruising and lower their arrestor hooks before passing the carrier. The flight continues on the course of the carrier until at least half a mile ahead, when the leader executes a turn to the left. Each aircraft of the section in turn continues for 15 seconds on the same course as the carrier before turning left to enter the downwind leg of the circuit. All these turns are executed at about rate 2 through 180 degrees. This 15 seconds gap spaces the aircraft at 30-second intervals on the downwind leg. It is on this leg that each pilot lowers undercarriage and flaps, then completes his cockpit check. The 15 seconds time lag of turn into the downwind leg results in a 30 seconds landing on interval. Flights of a squadron are led down into the landing circuit from the waiting or squadron break-up position without further orders, each flight leader judging the time so that the steady landing on interval is maintained. Pupils continue with their training until they are proficient on shore. Well, now you've done your ADL training, you'll shortly be leaving to apply this training to your first deck landings. But before you leave, I want to remind you of certain differences which exist in landing as carried out on a naval air station and landings afloat. Will you gather round a minute, please? This is a model carrier, which incorporates practically all the features with which you are likely to meet. Though there are several different classes of aircraft carriers in existence today, and you may find yourselves in any one of them, the basic principles of their layout is the same. Running from stern to stem, there is, firstly, the after lift. Then the arrestor wires, which vary in number from 4 in a British escort carrier to 8 and more in the fleet carriers. They are about 24 feet apart and have a pull-out of 120 to 150 feet. Next, 2 or 3 safety barriers, which are hydraulically raised or lowered as required, and are adjustable up to 7 feet. The accelerator is situated here on the port side. Then there is the forward lift, and finally the windscreens, which you will only find in the fleet carrier. Here are the distinguishing signals for calling in aircraft. They are known as landing strips and are readily discernible from the air. Those in general use are 1 strip for single-seater fighters, 2 strips for 2-seater fighters, 3 strips for TBR aircraft, 4 strips for dive bombers, and the circular panel for all comers. Should these strips be covered up when landing on, all aircraft return to the waiting position. Finally, there is the island. Avoid this at all costs. And remember that bad weather, operational stress, and the human element may take a hand when you least expect them to. Provided you're sufficiently rehearsed and you carry out your drill as you've been taught here, deck landing is not difficult or dangerous.
Yes, he realizes now. He didn't know better than the batsman. It might have been too late. Remember, the batsman gives you credit for knowing your job. Have confidence in him. Obey his signals, and you will find, as Wilson did, that deck landing is not difficult or dangerous.